Let's move on now because Kamala Harris is struggling in the polls, which has prompted the presidential hopeful to go on the attack. Now, there's talks of Harris even doing a lengthy sit-down with podcaster Joe Rogan as her team seems to realise that she is running out of time to sell her message to the American people. And it might be why Harris, this week, decided to do a sit-down with Fox News. And to point out why this was such a big deal, Harris has never done a Fox interview before. And maybe she should have kept it that way.
Your campaign slogan is a new way forward, and it's time to turn the page. You've been vice president for 3.5 years. So what are you turning the page from?
Well, first of all, turning the page from the last decade in which we have been burdened with the kind of rhetoric coming from Donald Trump that has been designed and implemented to divide our country.
Turning the page from the previous administration. It doesn't make much sense, does it? And she also missed the opportunity to look forward and define her campaign. Instead, her answer seemed to boil down to, "I'm not Donald Trump." She also appeared to not be prepared. Now, answers on her immigration plan, they clearly lacked substance and details.
Voters tell pollsters all over the country and here in Pennsylvania that immigration is one of the key issues that they're looking at this election, and specifically the influx of illegal immigrants from more than 150 countries. How many illegal immigrants would you estimate your administration has released into the country over the last 3.5 years?
Well, I'm glad you raised the issue of immigration because I agree with you. It is a topic of discussion that people want to rightly have. We have a broken immigration system that needs to be repaired.
So your Homeland Security Secretary said that 85% of apprehensions.
I'm not finished. We have an
it's a rough estimate of 6 million people have been released.
And when Harris got flustered, she resorted to fear. In her mind, Donald Trump was going to start locking up his adversaries.
He has talked about locking people up because they disagree with him. This is a democracy. And in a democracy, the President of the United States, in the United States of America, should be willing to be able to handle criticism without saying he'd lock people up for doing it.
Ironically, the courts and legal system have clearly been weaponized against Trump in a way which is anti-democratic. But you won't hear Harris talk about that. And my favourite moment of all in this interview is watching Harris struggle to explain why she told the biggest lie of the left, that Joe Biden was mentally fit to be in office.
Let me ask you this. You told many interviewers that Joe Biden was on his game, that ran around circles on his staff. When did you first notice that President Biden's mental faculties appeared diminished?
Joe Biden, I have watched from the Oval Office to the Situation Room, and he has the judgment and the experience to do exactly what he has done in making very important decisions on behalf of the American people.
There were no concerns raised?
Brett, Joe Biden is not on the ballot.
I understand.
And Donald Trump
but
is.
You talked about it.
And Donald Trump is.
You didn't have any concerns?
I think the American people have a concern about Donald Trump.
Damien, let's bring you in. Joe Biden, he has the experiment to do what he has done. Wise words. What do you think about that interview?
Well, it's classic Kamala Harris word salad. And what was different about this interview was it was with an adversarial sort of interviewer. It wasn't a softball interview. And he challenged her on the usual key messages. Now, one of the things that we teach people in PR and media training is that you should go to your key message. But the bit that she misses is that the key message has to have some depth, it has to have some substance, and it has to address the underlying concerns of the audience. And she kept going back to this key message about Donald Trump blocking this legislation they were trying to get through on the border, which is irrelevant in the context of the fact that she had absolute power. Let's remember the Democrats had the House, they had Congress, they had the Senate as well, they had the executive. There was nothing stopping her in the first 2 years of her vice presidency in driving an agenda on the border and getting stuff done. And she's trying to say that a bill that was brought in 9 months ago that was somehow allegedly blocked by Trump, is ridiculous. 6 Democrats voted against that bill, by the way. But even today, even in the second 2 years of their term when they didn't have the House majority, they still can do executive orders. The president, the vice president can write executive orders. So there's absolutely no excuse. She can't say I didn't have power to do this. And so what she was bridging to in her answer there was a lie. And Brett Baier, very rightly, was the first journalist to call her out on it. I'd like to see a lot more of that. I hope she really does do Joe Rogan.
Yeah, well, that would be a phenomenal interview. I think everyone would like to see that. Damien raises a really good point about, I guess, whether someone is battle-hardened because they've done adversarial interviews, and because she hasn't done it. She was so out of her depth. She's so used to doing these 60-minute interviews, Sophie, where clearly there are people that are on her side. They're not going to push back, and she's not used to that then. Whereas, say, JD Vance, he gets it every single time he goes and holds a press conference. It's water off a duck's back. He gets smashed so often by the media that he is battle-hardened. And I think that's a huge mistake politicians make when they hide themselves. They make themselves ill-equipped.
Well, this looked like a car crash interview, Jack, where she was mumbling, she wasn't making sense, and she just kept going back to the old argument, Donald Trump is not well, he's a bit crazy, etc., etc. The questions were about Joe Biden, and they were really important, and that was her opportunity to seize the moment and get out her point.
It goes to her character as well, Sophie, and she's trying to say, well, I'm not Joe Biden.
Yes.
But it goes to your character if you told people that he was okay, and clearly he wasn't. Why did you tell people that?
But she wouldn't answer that question directly, Jack. She dodged it and then went on to Donald Trump. Americans are not stupid. Now, she did that interview to try and persuade people who are Republican voters to vote for her, and also capture that group of Americans who are undecided. And I think she came out far worse off.
Yeah, I mean, Damien, would you agree with that? Do you think that people would be less likely or more likely to vote for her after watching that?
Well, look, I think the media is so partisan in America that I wonder how many swinging voters actually would be watching Fox and thinking about, changing their vote as a result of that interview. But there's probably a few, and I can understand the strategy of wanting to do that and step into the lion's den, mainly because it'll spread on social media and go through other channels as well. So, yeah, I mean, it's not a bad strategy if you can pull it off and if you've got something to say. But if your only answer is, I'm not Joe Biden and I'm not Donald Trump, and you don't have a message that is, well, who are you? What are you? What do you stand for? It leaves people to think, well, I could be anything you want me to be, boys and girls. Just make me president, please. And that's not what people are looking for in a leader. With Trump, I mean, he may not be that articulate, right? He's not probably as grammatically correct. He waffles, he rambles, he goes off on tangents all the time, and he lies by hyperbole and exaggeration. But you get a sense you know what you're buying, right? You know that what Donald Trump stands for, what his policies are going to be, and that's what the public want. They want that sense of confidence in knowing what the product is that they're voting for and what they're going to get at the end of the day. And with Kamala Harris, you just don't know.
Yeah, it's a good point. She spent a big chunk of the interview denying positions she'd had just 5 years ago by saying, well, that was 5 years ago. 5 years isn't that long with dramatic policy shifts.